You're listening to On the Links before the 123rd United States Open Championship. Broadcasting live from the Los Angeles Country Club. Here's Trent Rush and Nico Bolini.
We are at the Los Angeles Country Club in LA. Of course, we are being joined now by Tour Content Manager for Callaway, Johnny Wunder, hanging out with us. More than that, we can talk about his Callaway title. Good friend of the program, good friend of Angels Radio here, and it's good to have Johnny back in the friendly confines of Southern California.
Well, it's good to be here. Nico's the closest thing to a little brother that I have, so it's nice to see sit next to him, be in his presence for a little while. We don't spend a lot of time with each other, but no, it's a pretty gnarly week here at LACC. It's obviously going to be a very unique U.S. Open setup. I don't think anybody really knows what to expect quite yet. It's Monday, so. Some of the guys that played it last week said it was, kind of I don't know if I can say this, but it's kind of a BAL buster, ball buster. But I think it's one of those opens where the scores are either going to be really high or really low. I don't think there's going to be any in between. So it's going to be a fun week.
What's the day like for you today? I mean, we just saw, by the way, thank you very much for the tour of the Callaway truck here to check out.
My pleasure, yeah.
That was unbelievable. So, what are some of the things today that you're doing as the players are making practice rounds and, trying to get acquainted? Or are you guys, making tweaks, adjustments? Is that going on?
Well, like normal, I guess the only word I can think of, cadence for a Monday at a major. A lot of it's just checking in with players. You're here, okay, anything, going on. In one case, we had one player that dropped his driver on the concrete. It wasn't broken, but it had a cracked part of his driver, so we had to replace that quickly because he needed to go out and practice with the driver. The cool thing with Callaway's, we're all, and I am a content manager. I'm not a tour rep, but it's very performance driven and data driven. So, the amount of backup heads that they have for a player, if something goes down, they can replace it quickly.
Sure.
So little stuff like that, but ultimately Tuesday's the busy equipment day on tour or at a major because the players have seen the course, and if there's anything that they might need, Nico said something interesting before we started recording about that short par 3 on the backside. It potentially could play at 78 yards. I think it can play as long as 120 yards or 130 yards, but that's a unique hole. I mean, that's a very specific shot, and from what we know now about that shot, even at 75 or 80 yards, the green's really not holding unless you clip it perfectly. So I'm curious to see if a 62 or a 64 gets requested for that shot because there's really no other club. It's either a 60 with good hands or a 64. So that's an interesting shot. And then I think we might have some players come in looking for something they can hit up in the air in that 21-degree, 24-degree loft region, maybe a hybrid or a Apex UW, something they can hit up straight up in the air with some spin for holes like number 1, second shot into 1. And even it's not even just landing on green. Sometimes it's holding these fairways because these fairways appear to be actually pretty fast. So I think it's 6 to short par 4. Some guys will try to drive it and hit it in the back bunker, but some may want to hit something spinny out there in the fairway and have an 80-yard shot. So little stuff like that, but we wouldn't know that today.
So let's back up a little bit to that par 3, number 15. So last year I played in the George C. Thomas Invitational, which is a pretty elite mid-amateur here.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And Jason Gore and a few of the guys from the USJ, along with the director of golf, the superintendent, were all watching us on hole 15 because they had set up the golf course as a little mini prep U.S. Open.
Yeah.
So the rough was grown in. Hole 18, the fairway was pushed over all the way to the right, but 15 was the one hole that guys were kind of freaking out about. And they played us at 75 to 78 yards. And, Johnny, I'm telling you, that hole, it'd be easier from 90 to 100 because guys can get some speed on it and actually stop it. But if you look at the finger of the green, if you land it just on, it kicks it forward long into the back bunker. If you land it at the flag, it'll one-hop long. You almost have to hit it 3 feet past to have a little backstop, spin it down, or you aim 25 feet left, open the face a little bit, and try to hit a little spinny...
little side spinner.
A side spinner, yeah. And it's a shot that tour guys have. But that's the hole where you can ruin or you can derail the chance to win U.S. Open on a 78-yard hole. And I don't know if it's going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I bet you I can see it being a Saturday kind of hole.
It feels like a Saturday. It still feels like a Saturday tee.
Because you can make a double or triple very easily. Because if you land it short, and I saw it happen at the Thomas, guys would just miss hitting the green by a foot. And it hits that front lip, and it ricochets or trampolines it all the way to the downslope of the
nowhere to
front
go.
bunker.
Wow.
So now you're sitting there like, well, I got no shot, nothing to stop it with, and guys are going back and forth. Taylor Wood make double bogey. I was watching top mid-amateurs players make double bogey because you want to hit it at it because it's 75 yards. So that's why I was asking you about, is a Phil Mickelson guy, is he the type of player to throw a 64
He is
just for that hole?
Yeah, he's 100% the kind of guy that would do that because you have different types of players. You have players that can deal with a ton of variables and some players that don't want any variables. So like John Rahm would be considered a player that doesn't like having multiple variables, options, things to think about. So his bag does not change. So
He knows his game, yeah.
Yeah, he will adjust the shot he hits to match that hole. He's never the kind of guy that's going to come and go, oh my God, I need a 64. Phil, on the other hand, is that guy. Like, you know what? I want to try a 72-degree wedge for this one shot. And I'm just going to take out my 3-wood and maybe I'll make like a 4.5 wood. And just add some new stuff to the bag just as an experiment because it's not an intelligence thing. It's just his brain can take in that much information and react to it. Of our core staff, if it's Burns, Rahm, and Xander, they all keep their setups pretty simple. So like from those three guys, you're not going to see a lot of that. But Phil's on site this week. I mean, who the hell knows?
And so many of the holes at LA, Trent brought up a good point earlier about Alistair McKenzie kind of taking ideas from LA, which is unique, something I want to dig into at some point. But a lot of the holes here have fingers. Mm-hmm. So this is the type of course, hole 7, for example, that par 3.
That might play longer than the par 4-6.
If they do play it as a par 4, there's a little finger back right that I'm telling you, Trent, Johnny, like you can't get close to it. So a 64, but you're only 80 yards in your second shot, or if you drive her up there, but you still need so much loft and so much spin where it's like, man, there's 3 or 4 holes where those kind of shots come into play. 6, the front left flag, same thing. It's
6,
9 pieces deep.
I was talking to Austin Kaiser, Xander's caddy, and I said, "What are you guys going to hit on 6? Because you can hit it over the ravine or the dip in the bowl or whatever, and try to land in the middle of the green and maybe run into the front and the back bunker." But he's like, we hit a couple of drivers and we hit one like 6-iron down there and had like 80 yards, and he's like, the wedge shot into that green is harder than trying to fly at 330 into the. He's like, it's impossible to hit a wedge from down there.
The one thing you say, Nico, is you talk about, okay, well, you have that 15 hole where, okay, do you want to try to experiment and have a 64? But you got 5 par 3s out here. Mm-hmm. I mean, and
one of them's like a par 4. It tips out to 303.
They play so differently though. So like when you're so if you're going to put that in the bag, it means you got to take something else out, which goes to the variable thing. Like some players just don't. Most players don't like doing that. I mean, we got spoiled with Phil because he was always game. Sure.
For stuff like that, like covering equipment for a long time. He was always, Wingfoot in 2006 was the first time he actually put a 64 in the bag, and people thought he was crazy, and he almost won. Mm-hmm. But he can react to that kind of information. Sure. He's like a human being that can just thrive in chaos. And but you don't see a lot of that these days. Like there's not, like on our staff, for example, we don't have a lot of equipment tinkers. Like Chris Kirk, he'll switch wedges and some fairway woods from time to time. We have a couple of guys that are a little, I say on the miscellaneous scale, but most of our guys, once they get into a bag, it's fully cooked.
So you're saying there's no more Jose Maria Olazabals just sitting there doing triple bends on hosels?
No, there's just not. You don't get. I'm trying to think
So I played with Bo Hostler yesterday, and he does an interesting thing with his irons. He double bends the irons just for offset. So he back bends it and then forward bends it, so the loft's the same, but it gives it offset.
It's a way of bending offset into your clubs without strengthening the lofts.
Yeah.
So and he's not one of our staffers,
but he's a tinker. He's a kind of guy.
Yeah, he's very cerebral. Charles Howell, who's on Live Now, is like that. He would do stuff like that, just to try it to see, and a lot of it, that is their way into golf, is the tinkering. Yeah. So you get players.
That was your way into golf.
100%. But you get players that even on tour that play at an elite level, love to get into the rabbit hole. It's the rabbit hole that drives them. Bryson DeChambeau's like that. People say, why can't you just do it this way? Because that's not how he plays golf.
Yeah.
They know how to play in chaos. They want to know. They have questions. They want to know everything. So it's a really interesting way.
And adding to that rabbit hole is DeChambeau's now with Dana Dahlquist.
Which is just
to me, it sounds like a match made in heaven.
It's either going to go brilliantly or it's going to go for 3 months, and there's going to be some animosity. But
going back to your 64 discussion, so
Right.
what's nerving about that, because an issue I always had when I was playing is when I showed up on site, I was like, is my gear good? Is my gear good? Do I need to flight the ball down? Because you see all the vans, you have all the options, you see guys doing different things, and sometimes you get lost in your own belief. Your own belief system's like, hey, am I good with what I have? You know, did I show up with this equipment? Am I good?
Like maybe there's so much around that maybe
Like-
you lose a little bit of confidence in that.
Like Josh Anderson,
Yeah.
right? We met him in the Callaway tour van there.
Yeah.
He brought in some wedges. I'm like, he just almost qualified for the U.S. Open. His first alternate, but what's he doing tinkering in that Callaway van?
Because it's stimulus overload. It's
It is stimulus overload.
yeah.
You got to know to just put that away.
And the funny thing is, like, when I took these jobs, and Nico knows, him and I are as gear-heady as they get.
For
Like,
sure.
So we always said, wouldn't it be great to be able to go on the trucks, and I would do this, and now it's like, even for my own game, like, I want 14 clubs. That's all I want. Like, I don't. Every single time I consider getting like a new 3-wood, I'm like, well, then I got to try it, and I don't know if it's going to work, and I got to try the new shaft.
And there's so many
I gotta
combinations
it's
you can do.
There's so many things to think about. And finally, it's like when you find something that works, even if it's not perfect, if I know I can hit good shots with it, it's in the bag. Like, that's it. And most of the elite players, and there's a difference between like your perennial top 10 players in the world and the rest of the guys. Like Rom, I would consider in that elite class. Literally, he could take all the radio equipment on this desk and go shoot 65 because he's that good
Sure.
to be able. Do you know what? And I can say the same thing for Nico. Like,
Yeah.
some players are just extremely sensitive to the game and sensitive to like what's in their hands. Like if I hand him my dad's clubs, I'm talking about Nico. If I give Nico my dad's clubs,
I'll make it work.
he will make it work. Like
Sure.
I've seen him. Where were we at Palm Valley?
Palm Valley with played half set.
He played a half shot and shot 63.
It's a pretty good day.
It was a half set.
I shot 76 with 14 clubs in my bag, and I remember going back, and I was
Yeah.
just like, I remember looking at my dad. I'm like, that's just talent. I can't even put it into words. But you know, we have guys, especially on our staff, that are so sensitive. Like there's a kid from Canada, Adam Svensson,
Good swing.
who hits it
Oh.
as good as anybody in the world.
Yeah.
But his equipment sensitivity has nothing to do with the numbers on the screen. It's just he'll hit one and go, that felt spinny, or this feels heavy. Like he can't quantify it into like any kind of data or verbiage that equipment fitters would know. He's like, and then he'll grab something that's totally wrong for him and then just start striping it because he likes how it feels.
But well, you brought up a good point a minute ago when you're talking about like all the data these guys have,
Mm-hmm.
and they have every piece of information you could possibly have. How does that get weighed with the field side? Because I mean,
Well, that's
if you
on
have
the
it all
that's
set
on the
up.
player. That's on
Yeah.
the onus of that is on the player. That's where Rob is an absolute genius because you could give him numbers up the wazoo,
Yeah.
and for whatever reason, if he's just not feeling it, it's not going to work. Like I have a funny story. So the shaft he has in his driver is called an Aldila Tour Green. They don't make it anymore. They brought him out in like the late 2000s, like 2008,
Okay.
2009. So the shaft's 13 or 14 years old.
Yeah.
Played it in college, played it all through junior golf. It's just what he knows. Is it the best shaft for him? Who knows? But it's one he wants to play. So when they were starting to run out of these Aldila Tour greens, this is like 5 years ago, Aldila made him like an extra set, but they were different than the ones that he had in his driver for the whole time. They had like a different paint scheme on it. And he looked at them, and he looked at the one he'd been playing for a long time. He's like, I don't want this one.
Not gonna work.
Because the paint was different.
Yeah.
Because the ones that he has kind of like a rubbery feel to it and this was like had like a glossy finish. He's like, no, it's going to be different somehow. I just know. And they're like, this is exactly the same weight, tick point, fibers, everything is exactly the same. The paint scheme's different. He's like, I don't want to use it. It's not going to be right. So they have a whole like Aldila Rogue Tour Rogue or Green shaft program for John Rahm. They got scrapped, so they had to go back, retool the machines to get him to build him like 80 or 90 backups for his driver. So he has enough now to last him his lifetime. But they had to be the exact same one that he had been playing when he first.
And I know that paint he's talking about. I know exactly what he's
Yeah,
talking
it feels
about.
like it's like almost
like a rubbery,
rubber.
yeah.
Sure. Well, imagine going back in that boardroom meeting though, saying like, "Hey, we got John Rahm. He's all set. We're ready to go." Then it's like,
No,
"Ah,
you're
he,
not.
He doesn't like it.
You're
It's-
not set.
Johnny told me a
amazing.
great story a while back about Larry Bobka. So Larry Bobka was what? Was he not head of R&D? Was he design at Wilson
No,
Golf?
he was at Titleist. Well, he started at Wilson.
Yeah, Wilson.
And then he became like, I don't want to say head of tour operations for Titleist, but he was like R&D tour representative for Titleist. So he's responsible for some pretty iconic Titleist clubs.
But he was telling us stories very similar to what Johnny's talking about, fittings. And he said that Olafabo was like, this guy was a tinker, eternal tinker. Like, nothing was good enough for him. But then Payne Stewart would walk into the Wilson offices and say, what are those? X100 shafts? Standard, done. I'll play those.
I'll make them work.
He goes, give me your most basic set that you sell retail, and I'll make it work. Because Payne, with that swing, with that like syrupy tempo, Freddie Couples, another guy.
Yeah.
We were playing a few last year, and he has these Aerotechs and like these Bridgestone irons and whatnot. And he's like 160 yards, and he has a 5-iron. And I was like, hey, Fred, you have like 100, I think it's a lot of club. He goes, I'll just make it work. And he hits this like D-cell, bunt cut perfectly. It's like those kind of players are savants, and like they can play whatever it is and make it work.
We're talking with Johnny Wunder right now from Callaway. Johnny, look, I think for a lot of consumers out there, a lot of people listening to the show are like, okay, that's great. I see what these guys do on tour. Mm-hmm. I would imagine it's also tough to find the balance of, hey, just because it is what John Rahm wants to use doesn't necessarily mean it's right for my game. I know that's a big part of your job and sorting that kind of stuff out. So where does some of that imbalance lie?
Well, there really isn't. I mean, for every single golfer on the planet, especially, and I say you got to say serious golfer, because when it comes to like really thinking about your equipment, it's for the serious golfer,
Sure.
the person that's playing in earnest, like wanting to get better, is
Right.
dedicated to playing some golf. Weekend. Somebody that plays 3 times a year, has some beers with their buddies, play whatever you want.
Right,
Like, it's just
sure.
about having a good time. It's a social thing. But if you're playing once a week in your Wednesday group or whatever, and you want to get better and you're working on your game, then getting custom fit and all that stuff is very, very important. But the point to the Rahm story or the Mickelson story is taking ownership over what you're doing. Like, how you do one thing is how you do everything. That's kind of how I've always felt. So if you take it seriously and you want to get better, understanding what's in your bag, all 14 of your clubs, your golf ball, which to me is the most important part of the bag, and dialing it in for you. Go to a fitter, start messing around, get curious about your equipment. What makes the best, like your favorite club in the bag, for example. Why is it your favorite club in the bag? Because you hit it out of the middle all the time? Because you hit it far? Like, what is it about that club that is so special? And then try to make another 13 just like that. And sometimes when it comes to fitting, it's being honest with your fitter. It's like, no, like I can play. Don't go into your fitter and say, I'm a 6 handicap. I hit it pretty good. I can carry it 300.
Right.
Just be like, no, like I hit it out of the middle about 25% of the time. If I catch it, I can hit it far. But my miss is a big block to the right. I hit it thin all the time. Like I hate the rounds where, I might shoot 74 one day and 94 the next. Inconsistent. I just want to play good golf and start setting some goals. And in those goals, you'll find ownership for your bag. Because that's what all you're going out there with your golf ball and 14 clubs. That's all you got.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you want them to be correct? And I also think there's some value to, if you don't have the scratch to go get custom fit and buy a brand new set of golf clubs, then figure out the clubs that you got.
Sure.
And just get used to them. Figure out what you're going to need to do to make them work. You're going to have to adjust to these clubs as opposed to somebody adjusting those clubs to make them fit for you.
And what Johnny brought up about fitting is that back in the day, there was basically rifles and dynamic golds.
Yeah.
Where now there's 15 different types of iron shafts. So if I say, hey, Johnny, what shafts did I hit? He's like, you know what? I can put you in any of those shafts. We'll make any of those shafts. And then you got head combinations. We'll make any of them work. Just pick one you kind of like.
We could spend a month on shafts.
And we'll make it work.
Shafts, you're picking a feel. And the shaft manufacturers hate when I say this, but shafts are a timing mechanism. So, sure, some of them are tip stiff and handle stiff and, stiff in the middle to encourage a ball flight. But ultimately, like, it's up to the player to, like, I kind of like where it kicks and I like how it feels. And the shafts aren't the head is what's important, in my opinion. Like, that's 75% of the recipe. Well, 50% of it's the ball, 25% is the head, and 25% is the rest of it.
Well, you've said the ball a couple times. Why do you say that?
Because the ball, you play it on every shot, which is a Tiger thing. Like, the ball is important, but the ball is important. I mean, it's you build your bag around the ball. You don't build the ball into the bag.
Interesting.
And every player on tour does it the same way. That's when Rahm signed with Callaway. He was sold on the ball. So he's like, if the ball's right, I know with technology you can build me a set of clubs that I can fit around this ball. And so when you're, at home and you're a player that plays a lot and you're trying to figure out what golf ball to use, you work from the green backwards. You don't go to a launch monitor and start ripping drivers and go, oh my God, that one went so far. That's the ball for me. You hit some putts with it, see if you like how it sounds, hit some shots around the green, 100 yards, 120, 150, 180, 3 woods, 5 woods. Then you get to the driver. Because once you get past, say, 5-wood, you can jerry-rig a 3-wood and a 5-wood to fit a ball in 2 seconds.
Sure.
You can't jerry-rig a ball to fit a driver. So that's why the ball is just it's extremely important. So if I was going to tell anybody out there listening to this, if you're going to take something super seriously, figure out what golf ball you're going to play.
Do you think one thing that you've helped me quite a bit, and I think it wasn't the Xander ball, but it was a special chrome soft ball that
star ball.
The star ball.
Yeah.
So the issue a lot of players, and I'm curious what the tour is like, is I can play, most good players can play anything from 7-iron down. But then when you start getting to the 6, 5, and 4-iron, and say, for example, I have a 5-iron, but I want to take a little bit off of it, a lot of the balls,
You're at a spin
they don't
deficiency.
stay in the air.
Yeah.
They come out flat, and I'm like, I can't hold the green. So now the technology is going to where, and I'm curious if tour players suffer the same. Does Rahm ever hit a soft 5, or is he just going full?
No, he plays a spinny golf ball. Like one of the reasons why he went into the Chrome Soft X, for example, actually the biggest selling point, besides like what it did around the greens, the biggest selling point for him is on off-speed shots that maintain its spin.
Yeah.
So most of the time when you hit an off-speed shot, meaning a 3/4 shot, or you're taking some speed off, you're scrubbing some spin off, right? I mean, it's just how less speed, less spin. But
With short irons is fine. You want that.
Sure.
But when it gets to the mid to long,
for some players, but Rahm wants it to maintain some spin.
yeah.
So, he liked the fact that instead of losing on an off-speed shot, instead of losing 500 RPMs to spin, he only lost like 200 RPMs to spin. That's a big deal. That's, holding your line a little longer, holding the green. Because the moment the ball starts to lose its integrity, its spin integrity, it's out of your control. So, when you're thinking about your golf ball, and they say this on tour a lot, like you always want the ball to be in your hand. The ball's out of your hand, it's out of your control. So like Rose Zhang, for example, who just won her first tournament, I've never seen anybody in my life that has more control. The ball's in her hand all the time. It's never out of her hand. For any shot with driver at full speed, the golf ball is always completely under her control.
And the reason why that's critical, for example, number 4 here, right, is a par 3 downhill, and the green's a bit of a crown. And I'd always struggle on that hole because it's between like a 5 and a 6, 4, 5, and 6, depending on wind conditions. But if you don't, you want to hit it hard and high. But if you don't have enough and it lands front half the green, it'll roll off the front into a barranca. So then all of a sudden you take the 5, say you take on club extra.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know if I can hold the green now because it'll come out a little lower, it'll hit middle, but it won't have the spin. So that's why these subtle things are so critical. So like, hey, would guys switch golf balls? Do you ever see guys switch golf balls?
Changing it, like for our guys on our truck, changing the golf ball is like
It's not. It's
that's a code red.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you're changing golf balls, it's like because theoretically, based on how we fit you into your set, that means everything might need to change.
Yeah.
So and you'd be surprised how many amateurs, most of them go from golf ball to golf ball. I got a Pro V1X in my bag. I'm going to try this Callaway. I'm going to try this, and you're literally trying 9 different ideas from 9 different companies and 50 different PhDs to try and achieve the same result. It's a hard way to go. So, when you're going to start your season, for some people like in the north that are just getting into their seasons now, for next year or next time, think about your golf ball during the winter.
Yeah.
What are you going to play? Get that part right first. And then when you start buying clubs, start matching that new club that you bought to your golf ball. And little by little, start piecing your set together.
And you bring up a good point about like staying on brand because all the R&D that Callaway is doing is
built
with
around our golf
R&D.
clubs.
Is with R&D at Callaway Golf Club. So it's like, all right, well, it's made to fit for the Paradigm driver, for the Apex irons, for the Cleveland wedges, the Roger Cleveland wedges.
Boy, there's a lot to be said for that. You see that, and that's the kind of stuff that I feel like most people maybe don't even realize it, and it's along the lines of, I like Callaway. Okay, so I'm just going to buy Callaway because John Rahm plays it.
Right.
That's cool. And then you start learning about all this other stuff. You start to gain a greater appreciation.
Yeah, the advice to the consumers out there, especially I was a big Roger Dunn guy in Southern California, spend a lot of time in there. Like anybody out there at that store, start to understand the golf balls more, whether it's a Callaway golf ball or Titleist golf ball, Srixon golf ball. I mean, and the thing that you need to realize too is most of the golf balls, the modern, we'll call better player golf balls or tour performance golf balls, they're all fast off the tee. They're all awesome at high speeds. What does it do from 7-iron on down?
Yeah.
That's really what matters. And that means not just for John Rahm, that's for everybody. Because they're all low spin, high speed off the driver.
I want to shift gears back to just being here at Los Angeles Country Club. When you're as guys are getting more acquainted with it, it's also a place that nobody plays. Like most of these guys just don't know it. So is that an added challenge maybe for you and the rest of the Callaway team getting it together?
No, because we're in Southern California, so most of our tour staff, we got to remember, we're based in Carlsbad. So like Tim Reed that runs R&D for us, and sports marketing, and a lot of our guys are from Southern California. So this course for California, for any of the OEMs here, the TaylorMade guys, Callaway, everybody knows this golf course. Either they've played it before, they've been out here for the Walker Cup. So this isn't one of those super unknown golf courses. Everybody's kind of come across it at some point. Okay. This is a new setup, but ultimately, like Nico's played this place a bunch of times, it's still the same golf course. It's just you're having to
golf
make...
is golf, yeah.
There's not as many slam dunk decisions in this setup as there might be if you went out and played it with Bob the member. You're not
going to find 16 at Augusta where with a pin back left how everybody plays at a hole. There's no kind of...
Yeah, you don't have those. You're going to have to think a little bit more than you normally would. But, most U.S. Opens are like this because even now, like if they go play Winged Foot, there's been design changes to some of these old courses. So even if they've played the U.S. Open on it 15 times, it's not the same golf course. They've lengthened it 600 yards or something's happened to every golf course out there. And these, and I call them kids. These kids are so good. Like they react so fast. So, with modern technology and everything, all the information that they have at their disposal, by the time these guys tee it up, there's no reason to not be prepared.
All right, so I know a lot of people right now are probably putting together a little pool, probably trying to figure out who they like this week. And, okay, all the top guys, everyone knows the top guys. Who are maybe some players that off the board that come by, that come through that Callaway truck that you know what? That's a swing I like. That's a game that's in a good place right now.
I think so. My pick's Rahm. I pick Rahm every major just because he's just not human. And he's starting to trend back. He's if Rahm putts, he wins.
All right, so a backdoor top 10.
Look out for Minwoo Lee.
I like Minwoo.
I think Chris Kirk could have a good week this week. And I'm going to go with a Canadian boy. I think Adam Hadwin could have a good week. Yeah. This is a golf course that he gets it straight. He putts it good. Like he's good at plotting around golf courses, and I think this is a golf course you kind of have to plot around. You can't really overpower it here. So those would be on our staff. Those would be 4 that I would kind of look out for.
As soon as he recovers from taking that hit,
getting tackled on the wow, how wild was that?
There was somebody else that got tackled years ago. He tackled one of the trainers. Remember at the old Canadian Gulping Golf Course? I can't think of the name of it, but Glen Abbey. There was a trainer, same thing, came out and sprayed one of the players with champagne.
Joey D got tackled. Yeah. Dustin Johnson wanted to. Some guy lit him up. I wonder if it was the same guy.
Johnny, last thing, I know who's listening right now, driving in, on his way to go call the game, is Mark Langston. Good friend of yours, I know, friend of the program. Mm-hmm. Seriously, Langer, I know you're listening. Thank you. Thanks for helping set this up. And Johnny, seriously, this is awesome. It's been fun today, and I really appreciate you showing us around and teaching us a lot about what's going on here.
Absolutely. The funny thing is, when I say this when Nico sitting next to me, this has kind of been like he kind of lived – I kind of lived vicariously through him when he was playing at SC and playing professional, even still to this day. But this is kind of a him and I journey. It's like I work for Callaway, and it's cool, but it's always fun to connect with him and just be like, okay, we're doing this. This is all happening. It doesn't matter who it's happening to. I always felt like they're all team. We're here. So
our relationship is built on a set of Mizuno blades. If Johnny didn't play Mizuno MP29s at the age of 19 years old, we would not be friends.
You thought I was pretty cool. I was like, because you thought you were hot.
I did.
I got to tell a quick story on Nico. So he was, make no mistake, he was elite level golfer at 12, 13, and world class, and everybody knew it, and he knew it. But he kind of dominated. I think he was walking down that driving range because he was kind of like,
I knew everybody.
He's kind of like the young silverback gorilla. And then there was a new silverback, and he's like, wait a second, who's this guy with a Ping Hoofer bag?
Exactly, black Ping Hoofer bag.
And I was a garbage player back. I wasn't a good player, but I didn't play.
But he had the look.
There's a lot to be said for that.
The fit was dialed. But I will say, since the first day we met, which was, that was 1997.
Yeah.
So what is it, 26 years ago? One, he hasn't changed at all. He's the same kid, but we have been thick as thieves ever since that day, which is just bananas, 26 years later. So it's funny that Mark's listening. It's the closest thing I have to an older brother, and I got the closest thing I have to a younger brother here. It's kind of like the trifecta of
and like Preston. I said, and the relationship all started off on golf, and here we are 26 years later talking about golf equipment at arguably one of the most prestigious venues and tournaments in the world.
I've been trying to tell people for a while, by the way, it's a huge deal that this tournament is here. It's in Southern California. Mm-hmm. It's in Los Angeles. And what's kind of cool, I think that's being validated now this week. People are like, oh yeah, no, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
You get on property, the closest thing I can equate it to was when the Super Bowl was here.
Yeah,
it feels huge.
But you think about that when we were sitting around, like, we'd have these long talks. Either when we were really young or when we were drinking, sitting in a bar or whatever. Like, we used to talk about wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
And it's funny, like, little by little, we have these experiences, like, where I'm doing what I'm doing, and he's doing what he's doing. And it's like, just even to be sitting here with him right now at the U.S. Open on a radio show is bananas. It's like,
it's awesome.
Like, what would Nano think right now? Like, it puts like a tear in my eye. And his old man is like just an absolute god. So. He would be very proud right now.
You guys are the best. It's an honor to hang. Johnny Wunder of Callaway, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it. And I know you. I mean, having both you guys here, this is awesome. This is as good as golf talk as you're getting. Yeah, this is a monumental Monday.
Yeah,
That's the Los Angeles Country Club. Plenty more on the links coming up after this. For Nico Bellini, I'm Trent Rush. Thanks again to Johnny Wunder of Callaway. We'll be right back here on LA's Home for Golf, AM 830.
On the Links, coverage of the 123rd United States Open Championship continues after this on AM 830 KLAA.